And yeah, just to recap for everybody, so tomorrow we will return to the Psalm 7 presentation so that Rabbi Kleinbaum doesn't miss a single one. Today we are beginning Psalm 8, just doing the overview. And, you know, I am so excited to be able to teach class for this one morning. And if it's not great, we'll all survive it for 45 minutes and Rabbi Kleinbaum will be back tomorrow.
I'm sure it'll be fine.
I am sure too. With such a good psalm, how can we go wrong, right?
Right.
But Julia, I was still planning, are you singing us in this morning?
I am. And yes, I didn't know about that plan. So we'll still sing from Psalm 7, but that's all right.
Beautiful. I think that's
Yeah.
great. It's a nice transition. You know, it would be too dramatic a gear shift to just jump straight into Psalm 8 otherwise.
That's right. We need gentle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Psalm 8 is the psalm that I said every day when Rabbi Kleinbaum was ill.
Really, Carrie?
Psalm. I love this song. I don't understand it, of course, but I will now.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear your insight on it. Somebody who has such an intimate relationship with this particular psalm. That's wonderful. Did anybody else have a very early psalm, like first 10 for when Rabbi Kleinbaum was having surgery or when we started the Psalms project in 2016? Was that anybody besides Sherry? Because honestly, all the Psalms I'm most familiar with, you know, are from morning liturgy. So you jump straight into the 100 and some odds. And this is an extraordinary opportunity to learn so much more. Oh, I'm so glad to see that Cantor Nimi just appeared. And I'm really grateful that we've got so many musical and especially cantorial colleagues, because there are some fascinating cantillation marks in this psalm that I don't know what to do with. I can't wait to hear more about them.
I just found a wonderful article by Joshua Jacobson, who wrote the book, The Art of Chanting the Bible, Hebrew Bible, and he has a wonderful article specifically about the Te'amim in the wisdom books. So I'm reading that. I'm getting ready to. I wanted to share that with the class at some point, but I'm working on reading through it. But apparently, it's those three books: the Job, Proverbs, and Psalms that have a totally separate system.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yeah, once you're through it and can lead us through it, I would love to hear all about that. It's such a beautiful and mysterious like set of trail markers that nobody's really actively following. But when I was looking at this particular psalm, it was hard to ignore. So I can't wait to learn more about it. Is it sunny where everyone is? Is anyone having weather other than approaching summer?
Can I make a note before? Can I lobby for some time for us to study the book of Job?
Oh, wow.
It's my favorite book in the Bible. I think it's just amazing.
It is just amazing. It is certainly appropriate for these times. It is
honest. It's honest.
It is very honest. It is weird. It is difficult, and it's just it's so close. I love that idea, Dean. This past Shabbat, our bar mitzvah boy, Milan, who did so sweetly, such a wonderful kid. His Haftarah, which we didn't spend much time on, but we studied together. Satan is a really active character, just like Satan is in the book of Job, Dean, and plays a very similar role. So you can imagine this 12-year-old when he starts studying his Haftarah portion being like, but Satan's all over it. This is very confusing. It's slightly upsetting. And talking about the role that Satan plays in Jewish literature and in Jewish liturgy.
What a great segue. I hear it rumored you're going to teach a prophets class, a class about the prophets.
Yes. And for those who was anybody in that class on Tikkun Leil Shavuot? Cindy was, I see Rafaela was, Randy, Sharon. Sarah, it was a nice, Marcia was there. Marcia has already made said request about turn it into a class instead of a whirlwind tour at top speed. Yes, and I love the prophets. Rabbi Kleinbaum has a very close relationship with the Psalms, which I am appreciative and eager to learn more from such a great role model. The prophets have always been my favorites, and the things I reach for first. So,
When?
it'll be my pleasure. Speedily and soon. In
In our day.
In our day, yeah.
What we are in, I think that many of you are already aware of this. I'm sure Rabbi Kleinbaum has talked about this. What we're getting off the ground the quickest at the end of this month is the Hebrew classes. So at least 60 of you have already filled out our survey about, where do you think you would place yourself in these Hebrew levels? What kinds of times and availabilities are best for you? And can you wave at me if you've taken a class with the inimitable Mia Rothstein at CBST? Mia is a really extraordinary teacher of language and text. She is going to be doing these Hebrew classes. We're going to have, and we've got self-assessment tools to help you figure out for yourself where you would like to try out first. And of course, bouncing between levels is completely okay. But we'll give you sort of a metric. If you can read these things, then you should be in at least intermediate. If you can read these things, then maybe you want to try intermediate advanced. Mia will be teaching each of those levels. And then there will be a special offering for the Psalms class while Rabbi Kleinbaum is on vacation, the Hebrew of the Psalms. And Rabbi Kleinbaum and Mia are working together to figure out exactly what Psalms should be covered and how to dig deep into the language of this beautiful literature.
When is Rabbi going on vacation?
End of July. Somewhat TBD, but definitely end of July.
I thought she took July off. July, she takes July off, I thought.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's taken 4 weeks in a row in this particular year.
Yeah,
but I think we can all agree that Rabbi Kleinbaum deserves a wonderful vacation.
Yes.
So.
Absolutely.
Okay, it is 10 a.m. So unless there are any last questions about anything under the sun, I will turn it over to Julia to sing us in this morning.
Julie.
Good morning.
I'm going to share the screen so we can see, or do you want to tell us what you're presenting first, Julia?
I can, I'll share just 30 seconds. Yesterday we sang with Shefa Gold's pinpointing of just half of the last verse of Psalm 7. And today we're gonna sing a short phrase from, it's technically the second verse, but it's the first verse after the kind of narrative superscript intro. So the second verse, the beginning of Psalm 7. And you can go ahead and share it. The one thing I will say, perhaps in honor of Rabbi Rapport, because maybe you weren't here when, that's not
it?
No.
Sorry.
That's okay. Shir Yaakov, this is
sorry.
No, that's okay. This is a melody set by Shir Yaakov and Rabbi Shir Yaakov Fate. And he did not include an English translation. So I put one together using both the JPS Tanakh translation, and then I used a phrase that Kristen came up with for Yud He Vav He, which is Lady of Light. And that is to evoke the nearness of the divine and hope and the feminine, and also the nursing profession. So just to fill you in, Rabbi Rapport, that's where Lady of Light comes from, and Kristen could say more about that, but that's why that's in there.
Julia, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I have it. Do you want to just start singing?
It looks like Babette might have it.
Is it what you sang yesterday?
No, I sent it last night.
Oh, I might not have it either. Hang on, I'll have to.
Yeah.
I didn't forward it to you, Babette. I don't think you were on the email, but I can forward it to you right now. Sorry, everyone.
It's okay. And also we can just, appreciate the offering of this music. We can lose ourselves in it a little bit. And perhaps at the end of class, if we're doing the same thing, we can then approach it with its lyrics.
Sounds good. So the English, so it's Adonai Elohai Becha Chasiti, Lady of Light, my lady, in you I seek refuge. Adonai Elohai Becha Chasiti. Adonai Elohai Becha Chasiti. Adonai Elohai Becha Chasiti. Adonai Elohai Becha Chasiti. Yai dai dai, yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai, yai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai. Thank you, Harold.
Yes, absolutely. To begin this class, thanks are certainly in order, and it's such a beautiful practice to begin with gratitude. So thank you, Julia, for that gorgeous offering. Thank you to the team hard at work to bring it in every level to all of us. Anika was putting in the text into the chat. Harold was really quick on the button and was able to share it before Julia was even done singing. Harold also caught me up to some of the customs of the class. And I'm really, really grateful that Yael is being our TA today. I am so impressed and appreciative of the kinds of ownership that go into this level of learning. This is a massive class, and I have not seen one that is so dedicated to the learning for every student and supportive of the learning of every student, even in this enormous virtual classroom. So I just wanted to tell everybody how impressed I am, what a privilege it is to be instructing even for just a day, and how nice it is to share this morning with you. So in case a memo did not reach every single individual in the class, Rabbi Kleinbaum is leading a funeral this morning for Janet Pavlov's mother, Gilda, Zichrona Livracha, may her memory be for blessing. The funeral is at 11 and a Shiva tonight will be at 6:30. And Babette, maybe at the very end of the class, we can share the Zoom link so that if anybody would like to participate this evening, they can do so. And so I am stepping in as substitute teacher. Yesterday, we were sharing all of these gorgeous offerings, our own interpretations of Psalm 7 through poetry and through art and through music, and it would have been such a shame if Rabbi Kleinbaum didn't get to see the second course of offerings. So we're going to return to Psalm 7 tomorrow. And those who haven't shared yet will share, and Rabbi Kleinbaum will get to see all of your incredible creative output. Today, we are doing the very, very beginning of Psalm 8. We will scratch the surface and then you will return to it with Rabbi Kleinbaum on Thursday. Does that sound good? If anybody has any questions, of course, just put them straight into the chat. I'll look to Yael every once in a while to say, you know, where are we as a group? What have I missed? What have I completely bulldozed? But let's get started and share the opening translation of Psalm 8. So the Sefaria text, which will be our first level of learning. While Yael is looking to that, I want to share with the class my absolute favorite teaching tool for Tanakh. This is an app. I just taught Rabbi Kleinbaum about this yesterday, but the app is called Hebrew Bible. And if you go to the App Store on, an Apple computer or an iPhone, its icon is a chai, and it is created by a person named Zev Clemenson. This app is extraordinary and basically got me through rabbinical school. I'm holding up, my phone. You can't really, unfortunately, see the screen. But one of the things I love about it is Rabbi Kleinbaum has shared with you the greatness that is the Brown Driver Briggs, the BDB Biblical Concordance. All of that is built into this app, which is called Hebrew Bible. I'm going to type in the way it appears on the App Store into the chat. All one word, 2 capital letters, created by somebody named Zev Clemenson, to which I owe my rabbinic degree. And what I love about it is you can press on any individual word in any book of the Tanakh, includes all of prophets, includes all of Ketuvim. And if you press on the word, it will give you a translation. It will give you the morphology of the word itself. What part of speech is it? What gender is attached to it in this context. And then you can click through to the Brown Driver Briggs page. It literally has scanned every single page of that concordance and put it into the app. And it will also tell you how many times this word appears in the entire Hebrew Bible. So you can see if any of these words are hapax legomena. Have we talked about that phrase in class before, Yael or Harold? What is a hapax?
I don't recall.
Okay.
Yes.
So a quick recap for people who do or don't remember. Harold, what is a hapax legomenon?
It is the Greek for only read once.
Exactly. So this is a word, and it is not solely applied just to Hebrew Bible, but there could be a hapax legomenon in the works of Shakespeare, or a hapax legomenon in the book 1984. Whatever it is, if a word only appears once in its literary context, it is all the more difficult to discover what its meaning is, especially when we speak about the Hebrew Bible. And so many of these words are arcane and esoteric and require translation that we can't give them because we provide translation and interpretation based on context clues, right? But if a word only appears once, you only have that one opportunity to reap its context and make your best guess at what it means. And I think that Sarah spelled hapax just right. I would like Harold to double check the spelling for me. Just a silly story. Many of you know that both my parents are rabbis. They met in rabbinical school. And when I was 5 years old, we got a puppy. And my father was so excited. He had waited all his life to have a dog so he could name the dog Hapax legomenon, a unique dog among all dogs. But as a 5-year-old, I couldn't say the word hapax. So the dog was black and her name became Lila, which means night. But she had a very impressive name behind it all. There are several, because the corpus of Hebrew Bible is so vast, if a word has very few parallels, especially in its particular type of text, so maybe this word doesn't come up at all in Torah, but it comes up twice in prophets, but it's each a different prophet. Sometimes we still apply the meaning of hapax to it because it's so difficult to tell from context. Does Isaiah mean the same as Ezekiel when they use the same word? And in the Psalms too, we see a lot of these beautiful, completely particular and unique words, and we're going to see some of them in Psalm 8. So I think that I have tap danced long enough. We've got Psalm 8 on the screen. I was seeing in the chat some beautiful dedications of our learning. Certainly, I'd like to dedicate our learning this morning in honor of the memory of Gilda Pavlov. And if there are others to whom you would like to dedicate this learning so that their souls might ascend even higher, please put their names in the chat, and we hold them all in our hearts. And so we begin with the text of Psalm 8. Yael, can I depend on your beautiful oratory for the Hebrew text?
Sure. So I'll read one verse and you'll do the English?
Yep. And for right now, and I haven't been able to see how Rabbi Kleinbaum introduces a psalm. For right now, I'm just going to offer a possible translation, and then we will return line by line to break down some of the question marks in translation.
למנצח על הגיתית, מזמור לדוד.
All right. So for I heard that we have had thorough and thoughtful conversation about the word menatzeach. Can I see some suggestions in the chat of how we might interpret this word in all its plurality? I am seeing that there is a conductor. You can see that Safaria has chosen leader. An explosive outburst, a musician. Perfect. So for the one who is saying this psalm, on the Gitit, which we will return to, what is a Gitit? What does it mean in this context? A Psalm of David.
אדוני אדוננו, מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ, אשר תנה הודך על השמיים.
Yud-He Vav-He, Adonai, our Lord, how majestic is your name through all the earth, you who have covered the heavens with your splendor.
מפי עוללים ויונקים ייסדת, עוז למען צורריך, להשבית אויב ומתנקם.
Out of the mouths of babes and those who are still nursing, you have found strength in the accounting of your foes, to put an end to enemy and to avenger.
כי אראה שמך מעשי אצבעותיך, ירח וכוכבים אשר כוננת.
When I see the heavens, the delicate work of your fingers, the moon and all the stars that you have hung in their places.
מה אנוש כי תזכרנו, ובן אדם כי תפקדנו.
What is a mortal that you have been mindful of them? Someone with a fixed lifespan that you still take note of them.
ותחסרהו מעט מאלוהים, וכבוד והדר תאתרהו.
You have made them little less than angels and dressed them with glory and majesty.
תמשילהו במעשה ידיך, כל שתה תחת רגליו.
You have made them the master over all of your creations. You lay the world at their feet.
צונא ואלפים כולם, וגם בהמות שדי.
All of the sheep and the oxen, even those beasts that are not domesticated, that are wild.
ציפור שמיים ודגי הים, עובר אורחות ימים.
The birds of the sky, the fish of the sea, and whatever travels those pathways of the sea.
אדוני אדוננו, מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ.
Yud-He Vav-He, Adonai, our Lord, how majestic is your name throughout the earth. All right, let's go back to the beginning. And so in my translation of the translation, there were a couple key factors that I wanted to pick up on. Remember that every translation is an interpretation. And every time we render words from one language to another, we bring our own biases, agenda. The history of our spoken language shows up in the way that we speak other languages. And so we'll see if at the end of our 45 minutes together, if we've got time to come to some of the different purposeful and beautiful translations that this class has been relying on as resources to see a psalm through all the different facets of its jewel-like shape. And I will give you some of the background into why I made some of the choices that I made in its translation, and I want to hear what you think. So honestly, I didn't have as profound a relationship with the word menatzeach as the participants in our class. So I was really grateful to see all of these different suggestions as to what menatzeach could be. And this recognition that inherently these are pieces of music, especially Psalm 8. Because when we get to the word gitit, I saw that Cantor Nimi was sharing something in the chat. Cantor Nimi, can I ask you just to speak it out loud? Tell us a little bit about this word gitit from your perspective.
Sure. So some folks in our class are familiar with this book by Joachim Braun, Music in Ancient Israel and Palestine. And so he has a note on Gitit that it's often linked with the city of Gath, where David stayed with his troops. And so if that connection is correct, then it could mean in the style of Gath or upon the instrument of Gath. But there's also another term, a possible source, gat meaning a wine press. Mm-hmm. And so it could be a song, which I think is taken up by the Septuagint and Vulgate translations, indicating that it might be a song of the pressers or treaders of wine. So it's a bit of an ambiguous term, as a lot of this musical terminology in the Psalms tends to be.
Absolutely. So yes, there's a lot of space in the word gitit for us to insert our own imaginings of what this word might mean. Sharon, absolutely right, that we could imagine that is a musical instrument, and perhaps, if we're thinking of the characterization of David, he was a string player. He played a lute or a lyre. It was his skilled fingers that soothed King Saul's fits of rage. And perhaps this is referring to the instrument upon which this psalm should be played. But exactly as Cantor Nimi pointed out, it's not just a noun, it's also a geographic location. So Cantor Nimi was referring to when David stayed at Gat, but there is a character in the Hebrew Bible who comes from Gat, who is a villain and plays a very large role in the story of David. So who is possibly the largest villain in all of King David's story? Yes, Harold, Goliath. So Goliath is from Gat, and it's in this province that perhaps we can expect beautiful vineyards and a lot of wine making. So hence Cantor Nimi's translation, perhaps this was a psalm of wine pressers, which means maybe it is, stemming from this particular geography, or maybe this is the song that you sing when you squish the grapes. What is really interesting is this gitit word shows up only 3 times. And 1 time is in this psalm, and then there are 2 other psalms that have this phraseology of like, this should be with gitit, whether this is played on gitit, whether this is from gitit. And I see somebody saying that BDB suggests that we can put these 2 things together. It is a musical instrument that comes from this particular part of the land of ancient Israel. I lost my train of thought just for a second. This is why I should make sure that the TA is watching the chat and I don't get distracted. Right, so 3 Psalms have this introduction of gitit. This Psalm, Psalm 181, and also 1 more Psalm. All of these are really happy Psalms. And we recognize that in the book of Psalms, there's such a plurality of voice and emotional experience of the psalmist. And not all Psalms are happy Psalms. Some of them are full of vengeance. Some of them are heartbreaking. Some of them are very lonely. But maybe the word gitit means this is a joyful psalm, the kind of psalm that one would sing if one was creating or enjoying wine from the region of Gitit. All of the voices of those three psalms are particularly alike in character, as you will see when you get to Psalm 81 and 84.
We have a couple of hands up. Do you want to hear from people?
I absolutely do. Tell me about these first three words of the psalm. Go ahead, Yael, you pick the order.
Benjamin Shafran, you have your hand up.
Morning, Rabbi. I'm curious. So far, we've studied several psalms that begin with Lamnatzer. And each time, the article in front of the word that's kind of unknown is, let me just say it like, 4 begins Lamnatzer bin Ginot, and the same is in 6. In 5, it's Lamnatzer el hanechilot, and here we have just Lamnatzer al hagitit. Can we learn something from this different structuring?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is within every language, the pronouns that you choose to use, none of these things are accidental. Everything is by design. I think that we can have lots of questions about who exactly is the author or the authors of the Psalms, but I don't think we can have much discussion beyond that these were very carefully constructed works of art. There are certain grammatical rules that presuppose that certain pronouns must be used in certain contexts. Are they preceding a noun or an adjective? What exact part of the sentence structure? But whoever wrote Psalm 8 was thinking a lot about this. I'm not sure what we should take exactly from this particular pronoun stem after Menatseach. But I think you're right that we should be looking closely and comparing each time we see it, because it doesn't mean solely one thing.
Thank you.
Shep has his hands up.
Yeah, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but when Yael read the part that she read, I saw the word Shaddai, but it didn't seem to be translated as God. Is there another Shaddai?
There is. We're going to get to it. You're jumping ahead, but hold that thought.
Right. Okay.
Okay, that's it for hands up.
Great. And yes, I misspoke because I was doing too many things at once, and I meant Psalm 81 and 84, not 181 and 184. There are only 150 Psalms. So if you go looking for Psalm 181, I wish you a lot of luck, and you should definitely bring that text back to me, but you probably won't find it in the book of Psalms. Okay, we are 3 words in, but they're complicated. And then we get to Mizmor LeDavid. What can we tell each other about Mizmor LeDavid, friends? What is evoked for you when you hear the words Mizmor LeDavid? So Randy is absolutely correct in her careful translation. It's a song of David. Is anyone transported to a particular psalm when they hear the words Mizmor LeDavid? Cantor Nimi is saying Psalm 23. So is Marsha Melnick. This is, this phrase can take us in all different places because we have such different relationships with the Psalms. We recognize Psalm 23 from our funeral liturgy. Adonai roi lo echzar. This song of David is saying, God is my shepherd, I shall not want. Cantor Nimi is also pointing out that Psalm 29 that we sing on Shabbat, Harold is pointing out probably Psalm for Shabbat, do you mean 92, Harold? Or?
He says yes.
All right. And Rafaela is saying Psalm 27 as we think about the high holidays and its season. So certainly, we can have a couple literal translations of what Mizmor LeDavid means. You know, is it a song by David? Is it a song to David? Is it a song of David? Exactly as we were saying, like how should we break down that particular pronoun? It can mean different things in different contexts. But what I love about the words Mizmor LeDavid is for those of us for whom Hebrew is not our native language, we don't always have the experience of being transported by a particular Hebrew phrase when we hear it in a different context. And so truthfully, you hear Mizmor LeDavid in the context of the Psalms, but what I find so extraordinary about the Psalms is the different places they take us in the span of our lifetime, the different musical notes that begin to ring in our ears. It's almost like when you smell a particular scent and your entire body is just like whoosh down a tunnel to the last time you smelled that scent, whether it was outside a bakery or whether it's like the scent of a particular kind of tree. The words Mizmor LeDavid are so evocative and they have that kind of power, especially for those of us who are not as fluent in the language of the Psalms or in the language of Hebrew. It can bring us to all different places. And it's so nice to be able to recognize them and feel that familiar and intimate relationship with them whenever we see them in the book of Psalms.
Sarah Siegel has her hand up.
All right, Sarah, please.
I hope I'm following on what you were just saying, Rabbi Rapport. There's a song, and maybe it was one of these that you were all naming in the chat, but I have not got a good singing voice, but I have to sing the first couple of moments of it just to find out, does anybody else remember this too? Because to me, it's like a smell, and I don't even know where I'm transported back to, but it's definitely childhood. I learned this song in childhood, and maybe it was a 70s, I don't know what, or maybe it was real liturgy, but it's La menatzeach shir mizmor l'shir la 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 kol haaretz la menatzeach. What is that? Yael, you're
Yael is nodding her head, and
well, I know the melody. It's just one of these things that I learned in childhood too.
And what is it from?
I don't know it, but perhaps if we marinate on it a little longer, you, okay, Yael, or somebody else for whom it rang in their ears can remember what part of childhood or what part of liturgy, but that is exactly what I'm talking about, Sarah, where all of a sudden—
Every time I hear La Menatzeach, I'm singing that song to myself.
Oh, amazing. All right, I see that Lisa has her hand up.
Yep. Lisa Brown.
Hi. So I was looking at the altar, back to Ben's point about the different prepositions, and altar translates them as with or on, with strings or on strings, which is very interesting. So it's either an accompanied song or perhaps a melody that everybody knows. There is this, I hope this isn't a tangent, but there is in the Jerusalem Talmud a passage where they prohibit singing in the tavern because they were taking holy songs and they were putting bawdy lyrics to them. So, I mean, the use and reuse of melodies is ancient, and one can only wonder, just, you know, to your point of being evocative, one can only wonder if these melodies were evocative, if just playing the melody made everybody think about a text.
Sure, whether they were in the tavern or whether they were in the tabernacle.
Well, hopefully not in the tavern.
Okay, we continue a little bit, and the second verse I love because it will bring us to the end. We will see where exactly we are in terms of time. My goal is not to like work all the way through the psalm today. I will leave that for Rabbi Kleinbaum on Thursday. But yes, somebody at the very beginning of our recitation recognized that this, verse 2, is a refrain. So we see it here, and then Yael, if you can scroll down to the very last sentence of this psalm. I believe Harold had noticed that in the chat. There we go. So we have, you know, the ineffable name of God, and then we have a parallelism, almost a doubling down, especially in the way that we narrate the name Yud He Vav He, that we call it Adonai, though within it there is all of this opportunity for interpretation and translation. I love the way Julia rendered it in the song that she opened us with this morning. But if we sort of revert back to an assumption that Yud He Vav He is regularly pronounced Adonai, you've got Adonai, Adonenu. And so there is this feeling of Adon means Lord or master. It is certainly masculine gendered, but more importantly, it's a hierarchical stance. And sometimes in the language of the Psalms, you have an intimate relationship with God as a lover, a friend, a confidant, a member of your family. And that intimacy doesn't necessarily preclude feelings of abandonment or distance. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily close all the time, which is one of the reasons why I love the language of the Psalms. But here in particular, we get Adonenu, someone, a figure who is in charge. And then we have all of these different characterizations throughout the sentences of this psalm about the efficacy, the delicacy, the span of power from that which is most oppressive and crushing to that which is most subtle and most creative and artistic. Darina asked, is it known how they pronounce the forbidden name of God in the Psalms at the time when they were written? And I think that that knowledge, and I would love to hear what other people think about this, I think that knowledge was precious and extremely limited. It's the high priest, the Kohen Hagadol on Yom Kippur would go in and say God's ineffable name. Does that mean that other priests knew it and just didn't use it? How much is a closely guarded secret? But it reminds me in essence of this Hasidic story about when the Jewish people were experiencing times of trouble, a great rabbi would go into a particular forest, light a fire in a very specific way, and recite a prayer whose order was of utmost importance in the way that it was written, and then the Jewish people would be saved. And then in the next generation, the rabbi couldn't remember exactly the forest, but the rabbi went into a forest, lit the fire, said the prayer, and each generation it sort of eroded until finally at the end of the story, the rabbi 7 generations later says, God, I don't know where the forest is or how to build the fire or exactly the words of the prayer, but the Jewish people need your help. And so I wonder if that is sort of, that's how I imagine the transmission of how we pronounce God's ineffable name, that at one point it was very specific and sacred, and now we still have its imprint on us, but we're not really sure exactly what it says. I also want to point out that the words Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol Ha'aretz are an idiom that we hear in liturgy a lot. This idea of how majestic is your name, and we all have an understanding of God, the preciousness of God's name, literally not to wear it out, which is one of the reasons why we call God Hashem when we need an abbreviation. Ma'adir Shimcha B'chol Ha'aretz shows up in the Yotzer, the morning blessing for light. And then specifically, this psalm in particular, this phrase is lifted for Hoshanot, for the observance of Sukkot and the shaking of Lulav and Etrog. This is the phrase that we repeat. We have this metonymy of your name is spread throughout the earth, and you have covered the heavens with your splendor. So there is no limit to God's presence in the universe. When we say an idiom like from head to toe, we mean everything in between, right? We don't just mean that if you're covered in glitter from head to toe, only the very top of your head and the very tips of your toes are covered in glitter. No, your entire body is covered in glitter. And we see here a use of that phrase that, God isn't just in the earth or just in the heavens. God is everywhere in between. because I see it as 10:36 and I want to make sure that we have time for singing before the end of class, and this is kind of my only opportunity to insert all of my favorite things into the conversation that you will continue to have about this psalm for the next days or weeks or months, whatever the spirit moves this class to continue to focus on this particular psalm. I want to go to verse 3 and talk about the beginning of the sentence, which I translated it as out of the mouths of babes. Is that a familiar idiom to anybody else? What does it signify for you? Would anybody like to share? Somebody at the very beginning of class, we were catching up about how my 9-month-old baby is doing. And somebody said, well, you know, he's closest to God right now in his inability to speak, but out of the mouths of babes. I see that Saul has his hand up.
So I use that phrase to mean when children say something that is the truth, they just spit it out. They don't lie. They don't prevaricate, if that's the word. They just say it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see that reflected in the chat from a lot of different people, that there is no careful design in what a child says. It's just the absolute, the God's honest truth is what comes out. I find it particularly interesting that the metaphor here is out of the mouths of babes and those who are still nursing or sucklings, you have founded strength on account of your foes. And when we have this image in our head of what is the strength of babes or those who are still nursing, they are the most vulnerable. You know, these are creatures, whether human or animal, who cannot survive on their own, who are completely dependent on the care and the support and the leadership of somebody above them or somebody who has greater knowledge or greater experience. And literally without them, they would not survive. So how fascinating that the foundation of strength is with those who have next to none. But perhaps the strength is in, as Saul said, the ability to be as close as possible to honesty and to truth. Or maybe it is to say that when we are at our most vulnerable, we are also at our most powerful. I'd love to spend a little time on verse 4, and then I think I can just open it up to what everybody is evoked and what you have to share about this psalm. But oh, go ahead, please.
A couple of hands up, and it's 10:39, so I'm not sure we have time for the next verse.
No problem.
We also want to sing, so
yes, we do. The last thing I want to point out in verse 3, Yael, if you could share the screen, and then we're going to take all the hands, and that's what we're going to do.
Sure.
And if someone would remind Cantor Nimi, or if I have any other cantorial colleagues or people who love the te'amim, the cantillation marks of sacred text, if you look under, Yael, could you go to the 4th word?
Sure.
See the, you know, it's an upside down et nachta. And that is something that I don't know what it is. And I'd really like to find out. I haven't seen it before. It looks vaguely reminiscent of a carne para, which is a incredibly rare trope symbol, but it's not that. So I wonder what
there's another one in Psalm 7. I've seen it.
Oh, did you talk about it? Does anybody?
No, we have not.
All right. So when I was looking at this last night, that's the thing that piqued my curiosity. I'm going to do a little bit more learning about it and bring it back to the class. But if anybody knows, that is what I would like to learn. Okay, so we have several hands up. Let me hear you in whatever order our TA determines.
Sorry, so Sol Zalkin.
I think Saul got to share already out of the mouths of babes.
Never mind. Okay, Donna Gray. Donna?
Just a tiny anecdote. A story that I heard from Marianne Williamson of a new baby, and the 4-year-old wanted to go into the room and talk to the baby alone without the parents, and the parents were afraid, and the 4-year-old kept insisting. And then finally they let her go with, as long as they had that thing where they could hear.
A monitor?
A monitor. And they heard this little girl say to the baby, "Tell me about God, I'm starting to forget."
Beautiful. I've also, who else has heard the midrash about where the indent in our upper lip comes from? That it's either a kiss from God or a kiss from an angel right before we come into the world, or maybe it's a finger on our lips going, shh, like keep the secret. All right, Yael, who's next?
Simon and Sherry, and I think after that we have to go to Julia singing.
And I invite Sherry and Paquito if you want to put what you're thinking in the chat so that everybody can see it and we still get the benefit of your wisdom, please do.
So in the verse 3, you talked about the mouths of infants and babes. You have founded strength on account of your foes. Can you say a little bit about that? I mean, I don't quite understand what that means.
So finding your strength on account of your foes. I'm not entirely sure. When I was reading it, what occurred to me is sort of these crucible moments that so many of us experience, that we don't know the strength that we have until the moment presents itself when we are facing adversary, whether that's like adversary in the shape of a person, an enemy, or a foe, or adversary in terms of, you know, an abstract or existential challenge. We can certainly see that right now, that it becomes evident who we are, what is most important, and how we respond when things are less than perfect.
Okay, that works.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we're going to singing, Julia. And Babette, did you have, or Harold had the music up? Because I don't have that.
Thank you, Yael, and thank you, Rabbi Rapport, for beautiful teaching today. It was really lovely to have you here. We hope you come back.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about in verse 4.
Adonai Elohai B'cha chasiti. Adonai Elohai B'cha chasiti. Adonai Elohai B'cha chasiti. Adonai Elohai B'cha chasiti. B'cha chasiti. B'cha chasiti.
So I wish all of you only beauty and enjoyment from your study of this particular psalm. I will be back. I can't wait to drink of the learning that we're going to share together. I will ask Babette to share the link. So those who wish to honor Gilda Pavlov with your presence, as well as with our learning that we have dedicated in her memory, and also to the memory of those who are precious to us. The funeral is at 11. Shiva tonight is at 6:30, and I'll be leading the Shiva, so I might see some of you there. Blessings on your day. It was so wonderful to learn with all of you.